Thank you for listening to the show on Really Big Something Channel. April 6th, 2018.
The Kuhner Report is powered by Kelly Financial Services. Cleaning up your financial bull. Get the peace of mind that you deserve at Kelly Financial Services.
105 here on the great WRKO. Okay, later this hour, you don't want to miss it. The Mexican government literally passes a resolution saying now they will no longer cooperate with the United States in going after the Mexican drug cartels. And they are now warning us, if you deploy National Guard troops to the border, Mexico will consider this an act of war. So we're going to have all of this, so much more. But first, Syria. President Trump now wants to pull all U.S. forces out of Syria in the wake of ISIS's defeat. However, the Joint Chiefs and the Pentagon have stepped in, and they now say, no way, Jose. Joining us now to discuss this is the communications director and columnist for the Boston Broadside, the People's Paper, former university professor, former editorial writer at the Washington Times. I could go on all day with her resume, but I've only got 15 minutes for this segment. My wife, full disclosure, Dr. Grace Vuoto. Dr. Grace putting liberals in their place. Are you calling me from the Starbucks in Norwood?
No, I've given up the coffee, Jeff. I'm off the caffeine.
So, all right. So, okay. So from an undisclosed location, I read your column. It's up on the BostonBroadside.com. I think it is absolutely brilliant. What is your column about? Why can Trump not pull out the U.S. forces?
Look, Jeff, my message to the president is quite simply, stick to your instincts and ignore the top brass. It's time to bring those boys home. Bring American troops home. There are 2,000 men and women there, and they are really no longer needed. We have defeated them in Iraq and in Syria. We basically cleaned up the mess that Obama left, and now it's time to come home. But guess what? It's no surprise. The military top brass, the national security team, they told the president, no, you can't do it. And they're raising these two arguments. The first argument is they say that if we leave, you're going to cede control of the region to the Russians, the Iranians, and the Turks. Now, this argument is so easy to defeat. Hello? They're already there. They're already controlling the region. The reason that I was so aghast at Obama's precipitous withdrawal is precisely because this was going to happen. So those powers are now entrenched there, and what are 2,000 American troops going to do? That's not going to be enough to dislodge them. I basically argue, look, that ship has sailed. And unless we want to stay there for 10, 15 years, we are not going to dislodge the new configuration. We have achieved our purpose, which was to defeat ISIS. And now, as for the rest, let history judge Obama for the fact that we lost a lot of influence in the Middle East. It's on his feet. There's nothing that Trump can do to reverse it. And there's another argument that is being made, and that is that now we have to invest hundreds of millions of dollars to, quote unquote, stabilize Syria. Are you kidding me? Why should we have our armed forces lay down cables for water and electricity and build up another country's infrastructure? Trump should say, no way. He has rightly frozen the $200 million that was allotted for this project, and he should say it's just not going to go there. It's not our place to stabilize Syria. It's not our business to stabilize Syria. You know, one of the things that I raised in my column is, think about if George Washington was told this by his military advisors. Well, first of all, another generation, they would never even think that way. But if George Washington was told, you know, we got to send American men and women in a far-off land, and they've got to be there for, quote-unquote, stabilizing another country and resolving a civil war there. he would be thunderous in his opposition. He would say, just get out of my office. What are you talking about? Why is this going on? Why does our president get such really bad advice? Look, it's very simple, folks. You know what the American Armed Forces is today? It is no longer a fighting force. It is a bureaucracy with guns. It's just another bureaucracy. And what happens with bureaucracies? They always find a way to perpetuate themselves and to expand. And that is why we no longer win our wars, because they are being run by bureaucrats. Those are not generals anymore. They're a bunch of bureaucrats. Jeff, I remember. Go ahead.
Yeah, Dr. Grace, I got to just, you're on fire, but I have to ask you something. Are you calling me like from a cave? Or like, where are you calling me from? Because you sound like you're in a faraway, distant place. Are you in Syria right now?
No, not at all, Jeff. I'm using Skype. Is the connection not clear?
Oh, okay. All right. So you're on Skype. Okay. No, I'm just asking because the communication, it's like you're in a cave or, like maybe in a mountain in Syria or something, but it's okay. We're hearing you. It's just, there's a bit of a distant echo, but that's okay. Let me ask you this then, Dr. Grace. How can the military bureaucracy, the Joint Chiefs, essentially neuter the commander-in-chief? He came out and said, the war in Syria is essentially, for our purposes, over. We were there to smash ISIS. We defeated ISIS. Mission accomplished. Let's go home. So how can the military bureaucracy undercut and overrule the president, who, after all, at least in theory, is their boss?
Well, Jeff, I think it's because Donald Trump, as a businessman, he's not well versed in policy. And I think that when they talk to him, he backs down because they can be intimidating. They make it seem like, oh, no, Mr. President, there's national security reasons. And I think he doesn't have, believe it or not, he projects himself as an alpha male, but I think sometimes he doesn't have enough confidence in himself. Someone like you or I, we're schooled in the humanities, we're trained. If we hear bogus, even if it's in very sophisticated language, we have the self-confidence to say, that's a bunch of garbage, get out of my office. I think Donald Trump, because he's a businessman, because he's not trained in the humanities, he's not a professional politician, he sometimes second-guesses himself. And that's what's happening. He meets in front of these people, they look very intimidating, they seem very sophisticated, and he goes against his very own instincts. That's very tragic in a way, because his instincts are actually the instincts of a man who has very good judgment. One of the things I always say is it doesn't take higher education to have great judgment. My father is a case in point. The guy only had a fifth-year education. He's one of the most brilliant men I ever met. And Donald Trump should have enough self-confidence, especially in his killer instincts. They got him this far to be able to look at those men and say, listen, I'm in charge here. Your job is to execute my orders. I want out. Give me the plans to get out, period. Instead, Trump kind of gets bullied by them to the point that now he wants to get out and they're telling him he can't because we have to invest in Syria. So now he's on the phone calling Saudi Arabia and he's going, can you invest $4 billion in Syria? Look, that's a mistake too. It's not the business of the United States to tell other countries to get involved in other countries. This perpetuates constant dependence, meddling, and guess what? That is going to guarantee more conflict. One of the things I point out in my piece, Jeff, I used to do a course on world history, and I used to tell my students, look at the greatest military generals in history, in world history, like Alexander the Great. Why was he so incredible? It's because he knew not only when to advance, but even more important, he knew when it was time to stop. And we need a commander-in-chief to look at our American bureaucrats, the so-called generals, and say, hey, guys, it's no longer time to advance there. It's time to stop. Bring our boys, bring our women home.
Dr. Grace, let me just play devil's advocate with you. By the way, the Saudis, I know we asked for $4 billion. Are the Saudis going to give him the $4 billion?
Well, it's not sure just yet what the Saudis are going to do. We're not sure what they're going to do.
So they want us to plunk our money in, but when it's time to plunk their money in, sorry, we're not interested. It's not a good business investment. So always us being Uncle Sucker. But anyway, let that go. Let me ask you this, Dr. Grace.
Before you ask, I just want to say this. Can you imagine, though, think of the parallel. Let's say you know that your neighbors are fighting. It's a marriage that is not in good shape. Would you call another neighbor and say, hey, can you get involved in that marriage and rectify that situation?
No.
You know, maybe they have financial problems. Maybe you can give them a loan. I mean, that's the equivalent of what we do when we stick our nose like this. It's not our place to tell the Saudis to invest in Syria. Let them all figure it out for themselves.
Or, frankly, just to push your analogy a little bit further, Dr. Grace, remember we had one of those neighbors down our street? Remember they got into that nasty divorce? You remember that? Their kid kept coming over to our house. We kept feeding their own kid. Do you remember that?
Yes.
Okay. I didn't get involved in their marriage. Did you?
Most people know to stay away from anything.
No, honestly, I mean, even though their poor kid was always hungry playing with Ashton and Ava, and they would, okay, fine, you want to have lunch, but there's no food at home, okay, have dinner with us, we'll feed you. So even though we were feeding his own children, his own kid, I wasn't getting involved in his divorce. I wasn't getting involved in his intramarital. That's his issue. That's his problem. I'm not the policeman of the street.
Exactly. That's like saying, well, you know what? Maybe that marriage is in trouble because they have financial problems. Can somebody give them a loan? And then we would call the next neighbor and say, hey, you guys want to give that couple a loan because that's why there's a quote-unquote civil war in there. You know, that's what we're doing. It's like we're saying, get involved in somebody else's marriage, give them some money to help them through this tough time. It's preposterous. Every one of us would say, don't go down that road. And yet the president is faced with supposedly very sophisticated generals, very sophisticated men and women around him. This is the kind of garbage advice that he's getting.
Oh, we're talking with Dr. Grace Vuoto, V-U-O-T-O. You can read her latest column, by the way, at thebostonbroadside.com. She's a columnist for the Broadside as well as their communications director. Full disclosure, she's also my better half, but let that go. So, Dr. Grace, I've only got about a minute or two left. You know, time flies when you and I chat. And I want to just play devil's advocate for a second. If we pull out or withdraw all of our 2,000 troops out of Syria, that's going to leave Syria open for the Russians, for the Iranians, for the Turks, for the Saudis, for other major world or regional powers. And we're going to be ceding Syria then maybe to some of our mortal adversaries. And that's why the Pentagon says, don't pull out prematurely. What do you say to that argument?
I say it's already too late. 2,000 troops cannot make the difference. And if we don't want to cede the ground, it would take an investment of thousands more troops, which we're not interested in doing. Look, Jeff, we have to be judicious in our use of our forces. They have to be used in a targeted manner. There's always going to be conflicts around the world. There are always adversaries who are rising. We have to know when it's time to fight and when it's time to come home and declare victory.
We have been talking with Dr. Grace Vuoto. I urge all of you, go to thebostonbroadside.com. You can read her latest column. I love the Boston Broadside, by the way. It is the people's paper. You want an alternative to the mainstream media here in Massachusetts and in New England? This is it. There's special subscription offers for listeners of Kuhner Country. Call now if you want to get a subscription. I'm urging all of you to do it. What is the number again, Dr. Grace?
It's 833-800-NEWS. 833-800-NEWS. Please support us. Also, you can join us on Facebook and Twitter. We really want to be the alternative. We want to take down the Herald and then eventually be so dominant that we even surpass the globe.
833-800-NEWS. Dr. Grace putting liberals in their place. Dr. Grace, great job as always. Keep up the good fight.
Thanks, Jeff, for having me on.
Okay, and do me a favor. The next time when you call, could you get a better connection, please?
I think I'm trying everything. Nothing.
No. Let's invest in a proper hard line, Mrs. Communications Director. So when you call up my show, I can understand what you're saying instead of thinking you're in some cave or mountain in Syria or in Afghanistan.
All right, I'll do my best.
All right, thanks, Dr. Grace. I appreciate it.
I hope you have a Go Anywhere pillow with my pillow, Jeff, because I think you might be sleeping on the couch tonight.
Tell Lonnie, the owner of the Boston Broadside, to invest in a half-decent phone for you. I'm just saying. 617-266-6868. Okay, the Mexican government literally passes a resolution warning us not to deploy troops along the Mexican border. They say if we do, it is an act of war, and they're already threatening to sever bilateral relations, and they say they will no longer help us in the battle against the Mexican drug cartels. That explosive story next. 125 here on the great WRKO. All right, dramatic escalation now on our border with Mexico. Listen to this. So, President Trump yesterday was in West Virginia at a tax reform event. However, in a very dramatic fashion, as he's reading the benefits and the consequences of tax reform and how good it's been working and helping to increase economic growth, and the economy is starting to really take off and boom, he just got bored with the statement, thought it was very ordinary, very stale, very wonkish, and so he decided to just literally throw away the statement and say, as he said, to hell with it, this is boring. Let me talk about what I really want to talk about. And for him, it was about Mexico. And he said again that illegal immigrants are now pouring across our southern border, that there has been a massive border surge, and that this must now end. He is now ordering 2,000 to 4,000 U.S. National Guard troops to be deployed along the southern border to reinforce our Border Patrol agents, and that he is now demanding that Mexico do its part. He also made the point that women, illegal women who are being trafficked by these drug gangs from Central America or from Mexico into the United States are being raped in huge numbers. That this is a catastrophe, both for our nation, for the border, and even for many illegal immigrants themselves. Listen to President Trump say, I don't want to talk taxes. My country is under attack. Roll it, Brittany.
And I think with that, I'll start. You know, this was going to be my remarks. It would have taken about 2 minutes, but that would have been a little boring. Now I'm reading off the first paragraph. I said, this is boring. Come on, we have to tell it like it is. Ed. We have to get Republicans in office. And I think with that, maybe, Shelley, I'll let you start off, and we can go around, and I'd like to have Jim say a few words, and we'll go around the horn.
Thank you, Mr. President.
And we'll take some questions.
Yes.
So here is what President Trump said, quote, that Mexico is not sending their good immigrants, their good ones. We have to have strong borders. We will have the wall. We already have started building the wall. He then went on to say that they are pouring in. We don't know if these people who are now crossing into our country, we don't know if they're, quote, murderers, if they're killers, if they're MS-13, throwing them out by the hundreds. We're throwing them out, but we need even more help. This is our country, he said. And he said he is sick and tired of the anchor babies. If you have a baby on our land, congratulations, that baby is now a citizen. He says that the MS-13 gang criminals, here's what he said yesterday, quote, if they want to inflict pain on students, young women, young girls walking home and their parents never see them again, they're cut up. This is the kind of stuff and crap that we're allowing into our country, and we can't do it. We cannot do it anymore. And so he then said that I have ordered General Mattis to order the National Guard, especially along the southern border, to deploy 2,000 to 4,000 National Guard troops. In response now to President Trump's action, the Mexican Senate met. Emotions were flying very high, and in a unanimous resolution that they passed, representing now the official position of Mexico, here is now what the Mexican government has now said. They are now telling us they will not allow us or tolerate us sending our National Guard to the border and militarizing the border. Here is what the resolution says, quote, despite everything that is at stake in the relationship between our two countries, the way in which President Donald Trump has behaved is for the Mexican people unacceptable and intolerable. It goes on, the resolution says that President Trump must respect the people of Mexico, and that the Mexican government now, quote, condemns the unfounded and offensive expressions about Mexico and Mexicans and the treatment that is needed for a relationship between neighboring countries, partners, and allies. It then goes on to say that the Mexican government, quote unquote, condemns and rejects all efforts to, quote, militarize the border with Mexico, and that they now find Trump's actions deploying the National Guard as, quote unquote, deeply offensive. Furthermore, the Senate is now calling for Mexico, the Mexican Senate, to stop any and all bilateral cooperation with the United States in dealing with immigration matters and fighting transnational organized crime, i.e. the cartels, until, quote unquote, Trump acts with civility and respect. The Mexican government then said sending troops to the border is almost an act of war, and that Mexico is now responding in kind. They will no longer cooperate with illegal immigration. They will no longer cooperate with us going after the Mexican drug cartels. And they are now telling the president either he withdraws those troops or Mexico now is going to potentially sever all diplomatic relations between them and us. Now, one quick question, and I want to take your calls after this news break. 617-266-6868. Who the hell is the Mexican government to tell us what we can do on our soil, in our country, in order to protect and defend our border and our homeland? The last time I checked, the United States was not a province of Mexico. I know they're trying to annex us. I understand that. But up to this point, I haven't gotten the memo yet. We have not been annexed by Mexico. So now with the Mexican government threatening us, what should President Trump do? Should he even send in more more troops at the border? Or maybe should he pull back? 617-266-6868. Your calls next. But first, President Trump is defending his embattled EPA chief, Scott Pruitt. Evan Heidenrich is in the WRKO newsroom. He has all of those details. Take it away, Evan.
Thank you for listening to the show on Really Big Something Channel.
138 here on the great WRKO. Okay, things are now escalating dramatically on our southern border. Trump, in a speech in West Virginia, throws away the script. It's supposed to be about tax reform, and says he's now going to deploy 2,000 to 4,000 U.S. National Guard troops to the southern border. He says it is wide open. MS-13 is coming through. There is a huge, big border surge. He says we don't know who these people are. Some could be murderers. They could be rapists. They could be MS-13 gangbangers. I will not cede the border, as he put it. The military will be there helping the Border Patrol until the wall is built. Mexico now, in reaction to those comments, the Mexican Senate, by the way, as far as I'm concerned, all bought and paid for by the Mexican drug cartels. So basically now they're acting as mouthpieces for the Mexican drug cartels. They have now passed a unanimous resolution saying that they consider this almost an act of war, a deep insult to Mexico and the Mexican people. And they now say they are threatening to sever all diplomatic relations, all bilateral cooperation with the United States on two issues: illegal immigrants coming in from Mexico and any attempt to partner together against the Mexican drug cartels. They say until President Trump learns to, quote, act with civility and respect. And they are telling us in that resolution, we cannot and we must not militarize our border, that Mexico will not stand for it. So, my question to you is this. It is the Kelly Financial Poll question of the day. How do you prefer President Trump? On script or off script? If you like him more on script, in other words, where he's just following the scripted line, he would not have enraged Mexico had he done so. You can vote on my Twitter page at the Kuhner Report, Kuhner, or you can go to WRKO.com/Kuhner, Kuhner. If you like him on script, you can vote A. If you like him off script, and frankly, I much prefer him off script, you can vote the letter B. So, on script A, off script B. To me, he is the only president in my lifetime that has recognized the reality on the ground. This is an invasion. And it's been going on now for 30 years. Mexico is aiding and abetting this invasion. And I want you to think about this. They are now dictating to us what we can do on our soil, on our country, on our border. When Mexico wants to send the military to their southern border, we don't tell them what to do. If they have an emergency with people pouring across the border, if they want to send in more Border Patrol agents or send in the military or build a fence or build a wall, how come they can defend their borders, but we can't defend ours? That to me is point number one. Point number two, what they're now effectively saying is this: we will do nothing to help you against the dangerous and vicious Mexican drug cartels. The Mexican drug cartels are responsible for, listen to this, over 25,000 homicides and murders last year in Mexico alone. 25,000 in Mexico. They actually engage in more beheadings than ISIS or Al-Qaeda. And you're telling us you're going to side with them, essentially? You're going to let them run rampant? As they're slaughtering not only your citizens in Mexico, but our citizens here in the United States, and engaging in drug trafficking and human trafficking and peddling poison, cocaine, heroin, opiates into our cities, into our communities, killing our own children and our own teenagers on our streets. And you're basically telling us, blank you, because you can't control them, you can't stop them, you can't control your end of the border. So when we try to control our end of the border, you're blaming us and not them freaking Mexican drug cartels. Hey, I'm sorry. Enough is enough. And I'm tired of this garbage from the mainstream media. Oh, Mexico's a friendly country. Mexico's an ally. Mexico's on our side. The Mexican government is a narco state. Okay? If nobody else has the guts to say it, I'm going to say it. The Mexican government is nothing more than a front for the Mexican drug cartels. The narco-terrorists that are the Mexican drug cartels run Mexico. And every politician in that country, whether it be in the Senate, the Mexican Congress, or the Mexican president, is owned lock, stock, and barrel. So, in the wake now of this invasion, here's what I find incredible. Okay? Are there rapists coming across the border? Yep. Are there murderers coming across the border? Yep. Are there drug dealers and drug gangs pouring across the border? Yep. So what did Trump say that was wrong? How come this is suddenly so offensive to the Mexican government? And instead of siding with our own president, listen to this. Let me throw one more log on the fire. You have a moonbat governor in Oregon, okay, a Democrat, Governor Kate Brown, who is now siding with Mexico against the United States and against the president. She's actually telling Trump, you can order the National Guard all you want, but they're not coming from Oregon because I'm not going to allow them to come from Oregon. Quote, if at real Donald Trump asks me to deploy, this is what she tweeted out, asks me to deploy Oregon Guard troops to the Mexican border, I'll say no. As commander of Oregon's Guard, I'm deeply troubled by Trump's plan to militarize our border. That's the Mexican government line. Almost word for word. And I want you to think about this. On the East Coast, yes, we here in Massachusetts, and to be frank, New Hampshire, we are ground zero in the opiate epidemic. Okay? This is ground zero. We're dropping like flies. But out on the West Coast, Oregon, and in particular Portland, is ground zero in the opiate epidemic. You think we have overdoses. They've got overdoses in Portland. I'm telling you, they're dropping dead on the streets. There has now been a massive drug and crime wave that has hit Portland. Opiates now are destroying downtown Portland. And where do you think all these opiates come from? Over 90% come through the southern border via the Mexican drug cartels. So, to defend Portland, her own citizens, her own residents, schools, high school kids, children, teenagers who are being destroyed and devastated by this scourge. You think she would say, maybe we should beef up and bolster the border. Instead, come on in, baby. You want to get my kids addicted to fentanyl or heroin or any kinds of other opiates? Come on in. Kill my children, but don't speak ill of the Mexican government. Don't you dare control that border. She's a traitor. Okay? No one else is going to say it. I'm going to have to say it. She is a Benedict Arnold traitor. She is selling her own people that she took an oath to protect and defend. And she's selling them down the river to the Mexican drug cartels. And the idiots in the liberal media are like, oh, look at Kate Brown. Look at that brave governor of Oregon. She's part of the anti-Trump resistance. By her not sending the National Guard. And she has the right, because Trump there was two provisions. He could either have done with Title 10, U.S. Code Title 10, or U.S. Code Title 32. Okay? So he chose the lesser of the two, where you don't have to federalize the National Guard. So technically she's within her rights. It's true. Fine. Okay. Texas has said they're going to help. Other states have said they're going to help. We're going to get the troops from other states. It's going to happen. But from this moment on, because of the decision that she's made, every person that now dies in Portland or in Oregon because of an opiate or heroin overdose, their death is on her hands. Because when she had a choice to act, she sided with the Mexicans, with the Mexican government and with the drug cartel against her own people, her own citizens, and her own country. Shame on you. Mexico now says if we send in the National Guard, 2,000 to 4,000 troops, militarize the border, they consider it an act of war. They want to sever diplomatic relations and end all cooperation against tackling illegal immigration or standing up to the Mexican drug cartels. Has Trump needlessly inflamed the situation, or should he double down? What should the president do? And does Mexico have the right to dictate to us what we can or can't do on our own soil, in our own country, regarding our own border? Your reaction, your calls, next. Dave in Worcester, you're up next. Thanks for holding, Dave, and welcome.
Mr. Kuhner, sir, I'm loving this. It's a beautiful day. 3 quick points here. First, maybe the Mexicans can clarify for us the difference between Trump's troops and Obama's troops or Bush's troops. Maybe they were a little more tolerant. I don't know, but I would love to know. But we'll let that go for a second. Second point, they're going to help us stop helping us with the cartels, the ones that have been down there for decades and have been thriving. They're acting like that member of the team that has been doing nothing, and it's like, oh, yeah, you'll miss us when we're gone. Like, all right, buddy, thanks. But here's the third point. Here's the mother of all points, as you would say. The Mexicans have just given Trump the reason he needs to turn to the military and that new giant budget they have and say, hey, they're threatening war. This is national security. We have to have that wall. Got to have it. They just threatened us.
I love it. Dave, I love it.
They just shot themselves in the foot. So, you know what? Thank you, Mexico. Viva la Mexico.
Oh, Dave, buddy. Listen, I've got to say it. I've got to say it. You know I only have eyes for my wife, but I love you in a non-sexual way. I mean, buddy, drop the mic. I didn't even think about that. With them overplaying their hand, he's now a casus belli. They've just given Trump the casus belli he needs. Okay, you consider it's an act of war? All right, we're at war. Build the wall. Adios. Anthony in New Hampshire, you're up next. Go ahead, Anthony.
Thank you for having me, Jeff. We're obviously fighting a two-front war here. We're fighting with the libtards in this country and their outside forces trying to infiltrate us across the border. We definitely need to do something. If Mexico wants to declare war because we secure our border, then I say it's time for a tariff on all the money leaving our country to pay for the damn wall, because there's tons of money going to Mexico from the million of California driving illegals that just got their licenses this last year. If there's 1 million people in California driving illegally with illegal licenses, there's got to be another million in the woodwork that aren't able to drive. So they're a couple of years, maybe 10 to 15 years, from having a legitimate vote to succeed from our country. So we have to stop it. We have to do it. We have to stop them now. I don't care if he puts tanks on the border. We need to stop these people. They're coming into our country to take it over. They're not coming to become Americans. And the liberals don't understand that. We're all for illegal immigrants coming to this country to become Americans. But we're not having that now. We're having illegals come here to become Guatemala.
Anthony, do you think Trump should just call up the negotiators over NAFTA and say, my people are pulling out, NAFTA's dead, forget about it. It's over.
Absolutely. They're threatening us with war. They're threatening us with war. We can't enforce our own laws in our own country without an outside country trying to tell us how to do it. The liberals have been moaning for years now about Russia. What do you think Mexico's doing?
Brilliant. Anthony, brilliant. I think it's one of your best calls, Anthony. Thank you for that call. Jeff. Tom in New Hampshire. Go ahead, Tom.
Good afternoon, Jeff.
Hey, Tom.
I just want to bring up some facts. Don't you? Okay, more of a question. Don't you think the timing's very peculiar here with this? All of a sudden, they were helping us with the caravan and all that, and today, all of a sudden, things changed 180 degrees. I think, and this is just my theory, that the Republicans are behind the scenes here, working with Mexico. So they're not going to be outed by the media. They're working behind the scenes. Those people are for open borders and all that stuff. I think, and Dave brought up a good point. What was wrong with Bush? What was wrong with Obama when the troops were there then? So all of a sudden, just because it's Trump, it's no good. So I believe our political class is behind this, and I agree with you and Dave that the Mexican government's totally corrupt, and I probably think they're listening to the suggestions from these Republicans, the liberals, and the rhinos.
Tom, thank you very much for that call. Look, Mexico is a narco state. The government is owned and operated by the Mexican drug cartel. No, you know what I think this is? They're making a play on NAFTA. There was an announcement by Justin Trudeau, the Canadian Prime Minister, saying they were close to a new deal on NAFTA. And the Mexicans are balking about one particular provision. And I think they're basically now trying to leverage Trump or blackmail him, say, you don't give in on this one provision, we're going to have no help with the Mexican drug cartels. What is that provision? What are the negotiations and the stakes? I'll discuss that. Take more of your calls next.
The voice of Boston is you. On 680 WRKO Boston, an iHeart radio station. It's 2 o'clock.